That point you said about the lifestyles we lead and how that might be impacting our sex lives, I thought was really interesting because we don't talk enough about this. But when you look at some of the data on this demographic, people 30 and below, around that age, the extreme outliers are spending 8 to 10 hours on their phones, on social media and on the internet. And roughly about 15 to 20% of young people describe their usage as almost constant, effectively scrolling during all waking hours, while they're eating, while they're in the bathroom and before they go to sleep. So I was wondering from a dopamine perspective, if there's correlation between these like dopamigenic activities that are now like hijacking our lives, whether it's short form videos on social media, whether it's pornography or food, whether it's having an impact on what then happens in the bedroom and our performance in the bedroom.
If you think about what you need to have good sex, is you need to be sort of in the mind space for sex. And if you're constantly like hijacked by all these other things, you're never like really getting in the mood, right? You're just like, oh, I'm going to be turned on when I see my partner and we're going to have sex and it's going to be over. And it's just really a mechanical thing at that point, right? You're just trying to get an orgasm. You're not actually like spending the time to enjoy and to experience that fully because you're just so like, your brain is always doing something else, right? Because people are constantly scrolling, like every 60 seconds there's a new video, there's something else. And so it's really hard to focus. And so that can translate to the bedroom where you're having sex, but your brain is somewhere else, thinking about something else you saw or something you have to do or something you want to see or something you want to look up, whatever it is, but you're not really there in the moment. You're just going through the motions. And so I think that's really where the challenge is that people are becoming increasingly distractible.
I find it really hard, I'm going to be honest, to have sex if I've had like a really, really busy day or if I'm really, really thinking about something.
Yeah.
I almost have to like intentionally create quite a lot of space.
Exactly.
In order to be able to be in the mood.
Yeah, be aroused, right? It takes like time and energy. I think I appreciate you for saying that because a lot of people think that men are just ready to go at any moment. Yeah. And that's not fair, right? Because everyone needs time to be aroused. It's not just instant for everybody, especially when you have a lot of work stress or life stress or other things going on. It's actually like you have to make time and space for it.
Yeah, because as a man, you've got to get an erection. And I always think that an erection is a consequence, usually, especially when it comes to sex. And I'm not talking about morning glories here, but an erection is a consequence of like a story. Mm-hmm. You use the word aroused. Mm-hmm. There's like a story in my head which makes me go, oh, that's kind of hot.
Yeah. You need something. You need some stimuli, right? You need to think about something, see something, smell something, feel something, right? You need to just be together and sort of allow yourselves to be intimate before that sort of desire and arousal come together.
And for me as well, it's not just touch. Like that doesn't necessarily, for me, it really is quite like a psychological thing. I was wondering if there's any data around this or, I mean, just even anecdotally, like people get aroused in very, very different ways, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people are very like visual. So they see their partner and they get aroused very quickly. Basically, when you get aroused, you need to be in a parasympathetic nervous system state. So in order to get an erection, you need to be in the state which is like rest and digest. So if you're stressed, if you're thinking about other things, if you're essentially on the go, you are not allowing your nervous system to calm down. And so for some people, that's a whole bunch of different things. Some people can switch more easily into that state. And some people need more of like, to feel either mentally stimulated, or they need to have some associations. Like it might be like they need a certain scent. They need to like relax their body. They need to like go take a bath, whatever it is. But some people need different things. And knowing what that is for your partner is super important, right? Because then you can incorporate that. Everything is scheduled in our lives, right? And then you're like, oh, but now sex is like the last thing on the schedule, right? And like, I don't even think about it. Like, oh, okay, now, yeah, maybe let's have sex. But it's like, if you actually make time to be intimate, allow yourself to be in that brain space, be together, that's when it can actually happen, especially when you've been in a long-term relationship. It doesn't come as easily, like spontaneously, which we call spontaneous desire. It comes more as a response to these other cues that allow you to feel desire and to feel aroused.
I also think, I was thinking about a previous relationship I had where on the days where I'd been like working very hard and I was like tired or stressed or I'd been traveling and I was jet lagged, I think there was also, because I didn't see this person often, there was also an expectation that when I did see them, we were going to have sex. Mm-hmm. And that was very hard, because actually the expectation of it stressed me out more.
Yeah.
And that can happen. Like, if it becomes the elephant in the room, it can become a little bit heavy, which then is sort of counterproductive to
Absolutely.
performance.
And this is, sort of a variation on performance anxiety. So when you feel like you have to perform on demand and maybe you're worried it might not happen, it creates this vicious loop, right? So you maybe have trouble with an erection, or maybe it's like, I'm expected to have sex, but I really can't get there mentally. Whatever it is, now you're thinking about that, right? And then you're with your partner and you're like, oh my God, am I going to have trouble? You're not enjoying the pleasurable sensations or the visuals or like feeling each other. You are literally thinking in your own head about how you're going to respond. And then that anxiety makes it so that you can't get an erection or you can't be aroused. And so now you're like anxious and you're not focused. You're just almost spectating. You're just watching yourself have sex. You're not actually like in the moment. So then, you have a negative outcome, because when you're stressed, your sympathetic nervous system is on, right? You can't really get an erection or you can't really get aroused. And so then you're like, oh man, now I've let my partner down. Now I haven't performed, which I hate that word, but like performed the way I should or I'm expected to. And now something's wrong with me. And now that just keeps going in a vicious cycle.
Have you spoken to people that have experienced this?
Absolutely.
It's common.
Very common. I tell people anytime you have problems in the bedroom, it stays with you.
So how do you break the cycle?
Yeah, so I tell people when you're with your partner, take the pressure off penetration. Just explore each other's body. Do what's called like sensate focus, like explore the rest of your body. Figure out other erogenous zones, other things that can turn you guys both on that don't involve erections and penetration. And then once you realize you're focused on that, you're really like exploring, enjoying, playing, you're having a good time, and you're not thinking about your erection. Now you'll notice, oh, the erection just comes, right? And then once you get to that point, then you can start even touching genitals, but still hold off on penetration. And then after you realized like the genitals are, it's always working the way I want it to, and I'm not thinking about it, I'm not stressed, then finally you can then introduce penetrative sex again. So it's just sort of like a gradated sort of slow advance into, having sex again, but now kind of focusing on being more present and mindful and enjoying those sensations.
I think a lot of people will be able to do that, but there's also a big contingent of people that just avoid sex.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sore subject in their relationship for whatever reason. Both partners don't know how to communicate. They haven't got the tools to talk about these kind of things openly and honestly. Do you see that a lot as well?
Absolutely. I mean,
what do you hear in this regard?
So I think it's really sad. I see people come in and they're like, I ask every patient, like, are you having sex? Why not? Right? Because sometimes they'll say no, and most doctors will be like, okay. But I always say, why not? Right? Why are you not having sex? Is it because you're having an issue? Is it because you're having pain? What's going on? Right? And oftentimes I'll hear from people that my partner's just not into it and I just sort of gave up. And we just don't have sex anymore. For me, that's a red flag, because sex is a huge, important part of our lives. It is a way we connect with another human being. It's also telling that things are working really well. So when you have good sexual function, meaning you get an erection well, or you get aroused well, and you have a good orgasm and everything feels good, that tells me that, hey, you've got great blood flow to your genitals, your nerves are working great, your hormones are sending signals, like all these things are good, right? But also, sex is more than just the act of sex. It also helps you live longer. So there's been a few studies looking at sex and longevity. And when you look at people who have sex once a week compared to people who have sex once a year, the difference in all-cause mortality is 49%. They live 49% longer than people who only have sex once a year.
49% longer?
Yeah.
Be right back. No, I'm joking.
But even if you're doing like less than once a week, but more than once a year, it still improves your longevity. There was actually an interesting study in 1997, I think it was, where they looked at the number of orgasms men had. Mm-hmm. And they found that men who had, for every 100 orgasms men had, they lived like 13% longer. They had a 13% increase in life expectancy. And so it was really interesting to me to just showing you that like this is not just an act of pleasure and fun. It is, obviously, but it's much more than that, because people who are having sex clearly have better health. And this connection with people, I mean, loneliness is a big issue right now. The WHO made loneliness like an epidemic. So they've said that loneliness is as bad as having like 15 cigarettes. And so sex is a way to feel connected to another human being.
On that data, we're not saying that it's the sex itself that's causing people to live longer. I guess it's hard to establish causation in terms of...
Yeah, it's not necessarily sex, but they've looked at, like, they try to control for other things like age and comorbidities in all these studies. And it's also like sex is a cardiovascular workout, right? For many people, it's a cardiovascular workout. You are getting a physical activity with your partner. You are increasing your heart rate. You are doing these things that are also good for your body. And the fact that you're able to have sex, right, tells me a lot about it, right? You're able to hold a certain position. You're able to maintain this level of activity without getting short of breath, right? Like, these are things that having sex, keeps you healthy to some degree.
If I want to make sure that I have great sex, what are some of the foundational things that I need to be thinking of in terms of my lifestyle?
Yeah, so there's 4 main pillars of sexual health. And I like to think of it like your sexual health is your house, and these pillars are the foundation. And if you don't have the foundation, it doesn't matter what else you do. You can try to do everything else to patch up your house, but it's always going to break again because the foundation's not there. So you've got fuel, and fuel is how you nourish your body. A lot of the data I'm going to talk about is about men because there's just a lot more data on men and sexual health. But that doesn't mean that the same things don't apply to women. There's just less robust data on it. So when you talk about fuel, the Mediterranean diet is the most studied diet. So including things like healthy fats like avocados, leafy greens, nuts, and we're going to talk about nuts in a little more detail. These things are super helpful. And obviously having lean proteins, having an abundance of fruits, which we're going to talk about as well. There's a study called the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. There was 20,000 men. And they saw that men who adhered to a Mediterranean diet had a 22% lower risk of erectile dysfunction. So what specific things in that diet, right? People are always like, what are the superfoods I need to have? Almonds are great, but pistachios, they actually did a study on pistachios. They looked at 100 grams of pistachios. Guys ate 100 grams of pistachios every day, and they saw a decrease in erectile dysfunction.
So pistachio nuts will make my penis harder.
I mean, so I always say, like, I don't love to talk about superfoods because then people are like, oh, I just got to eat pistachios and it's all good, right?
Yeah.
It's part of a whole diet. But certainly having nuts, because they have great omega-3s, they have healthy fats. These are the reasons that they really sort of improve diet. Fruit, anything that has sort of flavonoids, so like colorful fruit, like blueberries, citrus fruits, lycopene, which is red fruits, all of these things improve antioxidants and also have been shown to reduce the incidence of erectile dysfunction. So having stronger erections, specifically blueberries actually came out to have, I think, something around 20% also improvement in erectile function when you're eating blueberries regularly. So lots of, I think, things in the diet that can be helpful. Also, fiber is one that we don't talk about enough. When you eat fiber in your gut, it converts to short-chain fatty acids. These short-chain fatty acids then sort of have these endothelial protective mechanisms. They protect the blood vessels. They make them healthier. And so when your blood vessels are healthy, you get better metabolic health. So you get less diabetes, less high blood pressure, less high cholesterol. And all of these things together improve erectile function. So I think in making sure that you meet the criteria for fiber, which is 38 grams for men, 25 grams for women, is really, really important. And then obviously managing your calories in a maintenance, right? Because we don't want to gain weight because excess adipose tissue or excess fat also puts you at higher risk for erectile dysfunction and other sexual dysfunctions. Next, we have strength. All right. So there's strength where we think about cardiovascular and resistance exercise, but there's also pelvic floor strength. So we'll start with cardiovascular exercise. The one study that's quoted very often is 150 minutes of exercise, of cardiovascular exercise, moderate intensity. When you look at the improvement in erectile function scores, it is the same amount of improvement as you would see when you take a medication like Viagra. So literally, if you do 150 minutes a week, you are getting the same improvement as you could get with a medication, potentially. And so I tell people, like, look, if you don't want to take a pill, this is a great way to improve sexual function. Now you might say, okay, well, maybe you're listening and you have heart issues and you can't really do moderate intensity exercise. They actually looked at that too. So there was a group where they looked at men who had heart disease, and they weren't really able to do moderate intensity exercise. So they did like a 5-minute warm-up, they did 20 minutes of walking and 5 minutes of a cool down. And with this supervised protocol, they still improved erectile function by 70%. So it's all relative to where you're starting, but any sort of cardiovascular exercise that's above what you are capable, like what you're doing now, is going to improve sexual function, particularly erectile function, because it's going to improve blood flow to the genitals. It's going to improve blood flow to the penis. It's going to improve blood flow to the clitoris for women. So that's where cardiovascular exercise is so, so important. In terms of resistance exercise, now these little weights are probably not sufficient for doing much, especially for men, in terms of improving muscular health. But obviously, we're not going to bring like really heavy weights to the table here. So one, we know that resistance training is significantly correlated with testosterone. So when you do heavy resistance training of your large muscle groups, so like your lower extremities, your glutes, you're doing like Olympic deadlifts, squats, that sort of stuff, you actually see improvements in testosterone. Now, it's not going to be like you do it once and you get this sustained improvement, but continuous sort of regular resistance exercise improves testosterone. There's also data that shows that when men do resistance exercise to maintain muscle mass, so we know that muscle mass decreases about 7% every decade of life after around 40. When you maintain it through resistance exercise, they're 3 times less likely to have erectile dysfunction.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they maintain erectile function, they maintain sexual desire, they maintain satisfaction with sex.
I read a quote yesterday that said, muscle is medicine. And I thought, that's really true. Based on everything I've learned on this podcast around, like glucose control and testosterone, and now you're telling me about your sex life.
Yeah. It is. I think people push back because they think like, why should I have to go to the gym? But our lives have changed. We sit at a computer or we sit at podcasts or we sit all the time. We're not moving. We're not doing manual labor, which is what a lot of our history is, right? Doing manual labor, farming, doing things outside, being physical. And we're meant to be physical. We're meant to lift heavy things. We're meant to move our bodies, and we're just doing less and less of it. So I think it's so important. The other thing is we want to prevent sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is muscle loss. And when you have muscle loss, that also increases your risk of having sexual dysfunction.
What about the pelvic floor? Like, how does that come into this story of orgasms?
Oh, yeah. So we missed that part. So the pelvic floor, here's your pelvis, right? It's this bony structure where all your organs live. This is a female. So I'm taking out the internal structures, which is the uterus, the rectum, and the bladder. And so that's what sits inside the pelvis. And so you can see this bowl of muscles here, right?
Interesting. I've never seen.
And you can see them from the inside and you could see them from the outside. That's your anus. And in this person, there's a vagina. So that's the hole for the vagina. So you can see that your anus and your vagina run through the pelvic floor. And in men, your penis runs through the pelvic floor. And so this, let me see if I can show you on this model. In this model, you can see they kind of show you the muscles here on the side.
Yeah.
So these are your pelvic floor muscles that are around the penis and the anus.
Okay.
Okay. These structures are very important for a variety of things. They attach to your bony landmarks here, your hips, your sacrum, your pubic symphysis. They attach to all these, and they sort of just work in the background for most people. How they affect your sexual function is when you orgasm, these muscles contract and release at a rhythmic contraction of 0.8 seconds. And so you may feel that, right? There's like this pulsing feeling when you orgasm, and that's these muscles sort of doing that. And when men ejaculate, the pelvic floor muscles are contracting to help shoot the ejaculate out. They squeeze when you need to keep things in, so they'll keep urine in, they'll keep your stool in, and they relax when you need to pee in, when you need to defecate.
So when you're trying to hold a wee, you're like tightening your pelvic floor muscles.
Correct.
Okay.
But these are also responsive to stress. So just like people get TMJ, where they get tense in their jaw because they are stressed and they like sleep at night and they clench up their jaw, they don't really know they're doing it. The same thing can happen. These muscles can get very tight, or they can get misaligned. So say you have a hip injury or say you have a back injury, the muscles can compensate by tightening up. And so a lot of people unknowingly have tension in these muscles, and it can present in multiple different ways. It can present with back pain. It can present with constipation. It can present with urgency frequency, because remember, your bladder is sitting right here on top of these muscles. So when the muscles are tense, your bladder is feeling like there's something activating it. And so it's like, oh man, I got to pee. That means I have to pee. This tension is telling my bladder I have to pee. But it's really that your bladder's not that full. It's that these muscles are telling you to do that. You can also have trouble peeing because you can see that your urethra goes through here. And if the muscles are really tight, sometimes it can be difficult to urinate because it clenches off the pee. And then with sex, it can cause pain. If they're really tight, it can prevent blood from getting to the genital organs. So for men, they can have erectile dysfunction. For women, they can have difficulty getting orgasms or difficulty getting arousal because they're not getting blood flow to the clitoris. Sometimes it can also cause premature ejaculation in men. And so these muscles are so important. And all we hear about is Kegels. And Kegels are exercises to strengthen these muscles. But Kegels are good when you have a normal pelvic floor, meaning like there's no tension, it's completely normal, it's acting normal, you're not having any symptoms at all. But if you have any of the symptoms I talked about, doing Kegels might make it worse because you're now tightening muscles that are already tight. Mm-hmm. We also talk about pelvic floor relaxation, doing exercises to specifically relax these muscles. So that can be diaphragmatic breathing. That can be doing like a figure 4 stretch. That can be doing happy baby pose, which are yoga poses, or child's pose. All these things can sort of stretch and lengthen these muscles so they can learn to relax again. Now, when it's really bad, you have to go see a pelvic floor physical therapist who can really work with you to identify which of the muscles are maybe more dysfunctional and maybe work specifically on those. But I think it's so important. It's under-evaluated and under-discussed when it comes to sexual function. It's a hugely important part of sexual function.
How many people are struggling with these issues, specifically the like erectile dysfunction issues? And what age are they?
Yeah, so it starts early. I think there's always been a sort of a disconnect where we think young guys don't have this, or if they have it, it's all in their head. That's not necessarily true. Many young men do develop erectile dysfunction because of biologic factors, but the data is really robust on older guys. So above the age of 50, we see 52% of men having erectile dysfunction, which is
52% of men.
And it goes up 10% every decade. So 60% of 60-year-olds, 70% of 70-year-olds. So erectile dysfunction continues to worsen. This happens because, one, our blood vessels get older, they get stiffer, they're not functioning as well as they should. And we're seeing also a rise in all these other comorbid conditions like diabetes, cholesterol, high blood pressure. All of these affect how healthy your blood vessels are. And so with these, they see the problem in their penis, or in women's case, in their clitoris, before they see heart disease or strokes or brain issues or dementia.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.